Your baby is asleep. The room is quiet. Nothing is moving. And then they wake up, screaming, staring directly at an empty corner of the room. Not at you, not at a toy, at nothing. You walk over, you pick them up, you look at that corner. There is nothing there. But your baby was terrified of it. And here's the part that should unsettle you. Scientists have started to wonder if your baby wasn't wrong. We've always assumed that babies are confused, underdeveloped, that they cry at nothing because they simply can't understand the world yet. But what if the opposite is true? What if, in the earliest months of life, before language, before logic, before the noise of the adult world drowns it all out, babies are perceiving something we can no longer see? What if the crying isn't confusion, but a response? This isn't folklore. This isn't superstition. This is neuroscience, developmental psychology, and decades of research pointing towards something most people aren't ready to accept. The standard answer doctors give parents is simple: gas, overstimulation, a developing nervous system that hasn't figured out how to regulate itself yet. And yes, that's partially true. Babies do experience intestinal discomfort. Their nervous systems are genuinely incomplete. Their brains are only running on a fraction of their eventual capacity. But here's where the standard answer falls apart. Because gas doesn't explain directionality. Gas doesn't explain why a baby turns its head at a precise 45-degree angle toward an empty corner before the crying begins. Gas doesn't explain why, in study after study, in households across dozens of cultures, parents report the same thing: baby awake, baby alert, baby staring specifically at a point in space just above eye level, to the upper left or upper right. Every time. The same spot, the same expression. The standard theory tells you it's random, but the data says it's not. In 2014, researchers at the University of Tübingen in Germany began studying what they called gaze anchoring in infants under 6 months. They noticed something that hadn't been formally documented before. When infants cried in environments that were otherwise calm and stimulus-free, no loud sounds, no sudden light changes, their gaze wasn't drifting randomly. It was fixed, repeatedly, consistently, on empty space. They couldn't explain it, so they brought in an unlikely collaborator, a team from MIT's Brain and Cognitive Science Department, who had been studying something called perceptual noise thresholds in early infant development. What they found surprised everyone. The newborn brain, it turns out, does not process reality the way you do. Your adult brain filters, constantly. It receives billions of signals from the world and aggressively discards the vast majority of them, keeping only what it deems relevant. This is called predictive coding. Your brain doesn't see what's there. It sees what it expects to be there based on everything you've learned. But babies haven't built that filter yet. Their brains are running on what neuroscientists call high perceptual gain. Essentially, the sensitivity dial is turned all the way up. They are receiving everything, every fluctuation in air pressure, every subtle shift in ambient electromagnetic fields, every micro-movement at the edge of vision that your trained adult eye has learned to ignore. Your baby is not hallucinating. Your baby might be noticing things you literally cannot. Here's where it gets profound. There is a phenomenon in neuroscience known as apophenia, the human tendency to perceive meaningful patterns in random information. Adults do this all the time. You see a face in static. You hear your name in white noise. For a long time, scientists assumed babies were doing a primitive version of the same thing, seeing shapes, perceiving imaginary movement. But the Tübingen research pointed to something different. When they monitored infants using high-sensitivity environmental sensors during these episodes, measuring light, sound, barometric pressure, electromagnetic flux, they noticed something strange. The corners where babies most frequently directed their gaze before crying were not random corners. They correlated with areas of higher electromagnetic interference, areas where building materials intersected, areas near wiring, areas near load-bearing walls where materials expand and contract at frequencies below human auditory perception, what scientists call infrasound. Infrasound. Sound below 20 Hz. Sound your ears cannot hear. But a developing auditory system, one that hasn't yet learned to suppress non-essential signals, can detect it. Infrasound at certain frequencies has been shown in adult subjects to produce feelings of unease, dread, a sense of presence. Researchers in the UK, specifically Professor Vic Tandy at Coventry University, famously linked infrasound exposure to reports of hauntings, feelings of being watched, and unexplained anxiety. Your baby doesn't have the vocabulary for dread, but they have the response. They are crying because something in their environment is producing a physical signal your body has learned to ignore and theirs hasn't. They're not seeing a ghost. They're hearing the building breathe. And it is frightening them in a way they have no framework to understand. But here's where it gets even stranger. Because infrasound is only one piece of this. There's another explanation hiding underneath all of this science, one that goes deeper, one that has to do not just with what your baby can detect, but with what your baby's brain is doing in those first few months of life that yours stopped doing a very, very long time ago. In 1987, a developmental psychologist named Dr. Andrew Meltzoff, now at the University of Washington, ran an experiment that would quietly change how we understand infant consciousness. He wanted to know, when does a baby become aware of itself as a self? What he discovered is that the answer isn't at birth, and it isn't at 1 year, and it isn't even, as previously thought, at 18 months. The process begins long before any of that, in the earliest weeks of life. And during that process, before a baby has any concept of I, before they understand that they are separate from the world around them, they exist in a state that has no adult equivalent. They experience what psychologists call oceanic consciousness, no boundary between self and environment, no distinction between what is inside the body and what is outside it, no filter that says that is real and this is not. Everything is equally real. Everything is equally present. Your baby in those first months is not an underdeveloped human. They are a maximally open one. Now consider what that means. When you put your baby in a room, any room, their nervous system is receiving the full, unfiltered signal of that environment. Every air current, every low vibration from the street outside, every energetic imprint, in whatever form science eventually finds the vocabulary to describe it. And in that maximally open state, when something in the environment spikes outside of the ordinary, they have only one response available to them, the only language they have. They cry. A researcher at Johns Hopkins published a quiet, almost overlooked paper in 2019 noting that infants in rooms with a history of acoustic anomalies, high ceilings, unusual resonance chambers, areas of known infrasound production, cried an average of 34% more frequently during night hours than infants in acoustically standard environments. Nobody covered it, but the parents in those homes already knew. Think about your own life for a moment. Have you ever walked into a room and felt uncomfortable for no reason you could name? Not fear exactly, just a low, inexplicable unease. Have you ever looked over your shoulder in an empty space and couldn't say why? That is a remnant, a faint echo of the system your baby is currently running at full power. You were trained out of it, slowly, over years. Your brain learned which signals were safe to ignore and built walls around them. The constant hum of the refrigerator, the vibration of passing trucks, the infrasound your walls produce on cold nights when the structure contracts. You are not more evolved than your baby in this moment. You are more filtered. And there is a difference. You are not just observing this from a distance. You are part of this story. You were once exactly where your baby is right now, wide open, unfiltered, staring at the corner of a room and feeling something that had no name. You just can't remember it. There is one more layer to this that almost nobody talks about. Developmental neuroscientists have identified something called the default mode network, the part of the brain associated with self-referential thinking, daydreaming, and what researchers sometimes call the sense of a narrative self. The story you tell yourself about who you are. In adults, this network is highly active. In newborns, it is almost entirely absent. That means a baby is not constructing a story about the world. They are not interpreting what they see through the lens of past experience, expectation, memory, or meaning. They are receiving pure experience, raw, unmediated, unfiltered. And some researchers, quietly, carefully, in academic language designed not to attract controversy, have begun asking a question that sounds almost mystical, but is actually purely empirical. What is actually in the environment that we have learned to ignore? Not ghosts, not the supernatural, but physics, acoustics, electromagnetism, infrasound, subtle oscillations in air pressure, the kind of physical phenomena that are real, measurable, and profoundly understudied because they produce effects we dismiss as imagination. Your baby may be the most accurate measuring instrument in your home, and they don't have an off switch yet. Here's what this actually means for you, practically, right now. If your baby is consistently crying while staring at a specific area of your home, the first instinct is always to rule out the obvious. Hunger, discomfort, fatigue, medical concerns, always start there. But if those boxes are checked and the behavior continues, predictable, directional, almost ritualistic, consider what your baby might be responding to. Is there wiring in that wall? Heating ducts? A structural junction? Is there something producing sound or vibration below the threshold of your perception, but not theirs? The reason this matters, beyond the curiosity of it, is that prolonged infrasound exposure has been associated in adults with disrupted sleep, elevated cortisol, and persistent low-grade anxiety. A baby who cannot escape an environment that is acoustically hostile has no way to tell you. They have only the cry and the stare. Listen to it differently now. We came into this world wide open, before language, before logic, before the weight of knowing things. We arrived with our senses turned all the way up, receiving everything the world had to offer. Every frequency, every vibration, every whisper of the physical universe around us. And then, slowly, we learned to quiet it. We filtered out the noise, we built the walls, we decided what was real and what wasn't, and everything that didn't fit the category of relevant got pushed below the surface. We call this growing up. We call this becoming rational. But maybe something was lost in the trade. Your baby, staring into an empty corner at 3 a.m., trembling, inconsolable, seeing nothing you can see, isn't broken. They are standing at the edge of a world you once knew and have since forgotten. And whatever they are perceiving in that corner of the room, however strange, however quiet, however below the reach of your adult instruments, it is real enough to them to cry about. The question isn't whether we should believe them. The question is why at some point we stopped. So I want to ask you something. If babies can perceive things that we can't, if that sensitivity is real and measurable and slowly filtered out as we grow, what else are we not perceiving? What parts of reality did you lose access to in the process of becoming an adult? Drop your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to know. And if this video made you think, there is a follow-up you are absolutely not prepared for. Because next, we're going into the science of why you feel watched when no one is there. The psychology of presence. The neuroscience of being felt before you're seen. That video will change how you experience every empty room you ever walk into. Make sure you're subscribed, because that one is coming very soon.